Kirk. Thanks so much for your time. How are you?
Doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much. In your mind, what does Penn State need to do to keep in it with Ohio State or even beat Ohio State? What have you seen from both teams that Penn State has to overcome at this point of the season?
Well, I think they played really well last week, for the exception of the turnovers and the penalties. I know they lost the game, but I think when they went back and looked at the film, I'm sure there was enough there to give them some confidence, even though they, like I said, they lost. I think offensively, you got to avoid those miscues, obviously. And to me, it's about creating some big plays. We were just talking with Coach Franklin a little bit about that. Ohio State plays a certain style of defense. They're going to play. They're going to challenge you. They're going to put you in man-to-man situations, and it's really going to come down to Penn State's offense, especially with some new faces. Can they win man-to-man? Can they create some opportunities and make explosives and get separation? And the other thing that ties into that is, do they give Sean Clifford enough time to be able to throw the football? So I think it's about explosives offensively, trying to take advantage of Ohio State playing a high-risk, high-reward type of defense. And then I think the other thing for Penn State's defense is you got to contain Justin Fields' big playability and his creativity. There's so many things he can do to you, throwing the football and improvising. Penn State has such good defensive ends with Owe and Tony that they've got to squeeze and not let him break contain and make a lot of big plays with his feet and his arm.
All right, we'll go to Parth next. I apologize, Parth. I'm not even going to try to say your last name because I don't want to be disrespectful. I know how it is when names mispronounced. So you can go next with Will Pegler on deck. Go ahead, Parth.
Hey, Kirk, how you doing? Appreciate the time.
Good. Can you say your last name just so I can hear it?
Yeah, it's Upadhyay.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad you said that. I would have struggled with Anna.
So on Tuesday, Urban Meyer said that, a whiteout versus no whiteout would create a 7 to 10 point differential for Penn State. How accurate of an assessment is that from Urban, in your opinion?
I think it's so subjective. It's impossible to really know. We all brag every time I come to Penn State. We talk about the whiteout. We talk about what an incredible atmosphere it is. The Penn State community really comes together. The players feed off of it. The team obviously is inspired by it. And if you eliminate that aspect of it, I don't know if it's 7. I don't know how many points it is. It's clearly a different game. You guys have been watching college football, and in the Big Ten, where they're only we did the Minnesota-Michigan game up in Minneapolis last week, and there was just family there. You score a big touchdown, and it's like, you get a sack and a fumble, and usually, the music's going, and it's just nothing. So I don't know who it favors. It's just so different, and you got to generate. Who can do a better job of showing maturity, of generating emotion and energy and juice to get yourself ready to play a game. So, but yeah, it's you take that kind of home field advantage away, it's obviously gonna be have an impact on the game.
All right, we'll go to Will Pegler next with Jack Washer on deck. Go ahead, Will.
Hey, Kirk, how's it going?
Good.
So you've already talked a little bit, or a lot actually, about how much you love Beaver Stadium's atmosphere, getting to come here 4 years in a row. Just wondering how you personally really are gonna miss the whiteout atmosphere this year for such a big game at Beaver Stadium.
I'm really trying hard throughout all this to stay kind of with a lens of being positive. I've done that with my kids. I've done that with my job, my wife. I've just tried not to be that guy that's dwelling on what we don't have. And even in college football, I tweeted out a video of last year's Penn State whiteout, just to kind of reflect on, man, we miss these atmospheres on a week like this. But, of course I'm going to miss that energy. I love that stadium. I love that student section. I love when those two teams get together, and I'm lucky enough to be in the booth calling the game. It's my favorite. It's one of my favorite games that I do all year, including national championships and the Rose Bowl and the semifinal. I do all these big games, but there's something always I remember every year about the whiteout. So not being able to do that game this year obviously is something that's not cool, but it is what it is, and I'm trying to stay, like I said, in a very positive frame of mind and trying to reflect on. We get to watch Shaka Toney pass rush Justin Fields, and we get to watch these two teams play each other. So I'm trying to stay in that lane.
All right, we'll go to Jack next with Ryan Parsons on deck. Go ahead, Jack.
Hey, Kirk, as you kind of traveled around college football this year, not only with tomorrow when Penn State plays Ohio State, but what's kind of the big difference that you see with visiting teams for like a primetime game that they're either having more success with, or you're just seeing something different with how visiting teams are, either where it's play calling or whatnot, just in terms of, in years past where like you run out of a tunnel and you maybe have 100,000 fans and it just, you notice something different about, a visiting team going into what is normally a hostile environment?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's kind of varied. I opened up the season on Labor Day night, and it was BYU at Navy, and there wasn't one human being in the stadium. That was my introduction into the COVID 2020 college football season. I'm talking, there wasn't somebody from the staff. There wasn't a family member. There was nobody. So the things that jumped out at me right away were when the teams normally run onto the field in a normal setting. If it's a Penn State blue jersey, they're cheered and everyone goes crazy. I'm talking warm-ups. And if it's an Ohio State white jersey, everybody's booing. There's energy in the building, in the stadium. And BYU and Navy, they took the field, and it was like there was no reaction. It was like watching a practice. And then when the game started, the thing that stood out to me was how easy it was for the coaches just to yell out something to the quarterback or to the offense. They didn't really have to yell. They were just communicating very easily with one another. The quarterback, how easy it is to communicate with the receivers. The offensive linemen, when they're down in the stance, they're talking, to each other, Lucky, or Ringo, whatever their call is. And you can hear them with our mics. You can hear them communicating. And so I don't know if fans really realized before all this how much communication is going on in between plays and during plays, especially the offense, and then the defense reacts. But that's the thing that's really stood out to me. Some of the SEC games I've done, there's 20,000 people in there. They've got crowd noise. I mean, you'd be shocked how loud it is. But a few of these games, and a game this weekend, it'll be really, really quiet. And those are the things that stand out. The visiting team not taking the field, getting booed, and how dead the atmosphere is, and how easy it is to communicate as an offensive player. And by the way, for Penn State's defense, when their defense is on the field, normally it's so loud you can't hear yourself think. So they have to communicate with hand signals. Now the defense can communicate just as easy as the offense. So it's just a different game right now in what we're watching.
All right, we'll go to Ryan Parsons with Jamie Apathy on deck. Go ahead, Ryan.
Hey, Kirk, how are you?
Good.
So you talked a little bit about missing the whiteout and missing the energy. Like, how do you and the rest of the broadcast team kind of plan to bring that energy back without fans in the stadium?
Well, we're gonna hope that the game brings that energy. That's what I've seen watching these first 7 or 8 weeks of the season. You tend to get still those 3rd down and 7 moments that are critical in the game, that if you're watching at home, I don't know how you guys have felt when you watch games, no matter what sport it is, there's still those moments in the game that kind of capture you. Now, it would be a heck of a lot better if you had 90,000 people going crazy to help with that energy. But what I've found that's helped me is after I get into the booth and I look around and I see an empty stadium and, man, it's so weird. I get my headphones on, I get my board, and I just kind of get locked in on the game and the players and what's going on. And I found myself doing that really as a viewer. When I watch these games, I just kind of get caught up more, instead of missing the crowd and the energy, I get caught up more in what the storyline is as the game is unfolding. And that's what we're going to do on the broadcast. I mean, we're going to sprinkle in some moments that we all remember and appreciate, but you can't manufacture that, you know. We'll see what Penn State's game ops, who I think's, you know, some of the best in the country, see what they have up their sleeve to try to help with that. But we'll just react to what we have and hope that it's the competitive game and hope that people are in.
All right, we'll go to Jamie next with Nubias Wilborn on deck. Go ahead, Jamie.
Hi there, Kirk. Sorry if you could hear my homeschooling going on upstairs. But you've obviously been doing this a long time, and I'm sure you watched the end of that game for Penn State last week and could feel for those Penn State fans who were absolutely crushed. I'm not sure that they're still over it yet a week later. And what do you, I mean, and now they've got Ohio State, which is going to be a crazy one, as it always is. Do you feel for Penn State fans after the way that last week ended?
Yeah, I just feel for any fans and especially players and coaches when a game ends with a call like that. I was in our booth. We're literally a minute from going on air in Minneapolis, and the game is in overtime, and we've got all these monitors up in our booth, and they put on other games, and I'm like watching the game into the overtime, and then Indiana scored, and they're going to go, and we came on the air. We did our open, and then they scored, and then they're reviewing it, and we went to our first break, and I'm watching, and I'm looking at it, and I'm thinking, because they had that angle, and it was like a super slow-mo, and I kept seeing the ball hit the ground and then hit the pylon, and I'm like, there's no way that as far as I understand the rule, there's no way that that'll be good. And they kept reviewing, and then, of course, they said it was good, and I was like, what in the heck? I mean, I was more perplexed because I thought I knew the rule, and I thought you could clearly see the ball hit the ground. So I'm still kind of confused by the whole thing. I guess it was so close. It was one of those, whatever the call on the field, we'll just stick with the call on the field. But if I were a Penn State player or fan, if I were a player, I would say, well, we turned it over 3 times. We had 10 penalties. We missed 2 field goals. We shouldn't have put ourselves in that position to begin with. That's what I would say as a player. But as a fan, I'd be throwing something at my TV, you know, like anybody else. I'd be upset and frustrated. So I get it. And on the other hand, Tom Allen, man, he's come so close with Indiana beating an Ohio State or beating a Michigan or beating a Penn State. And so that was a monumental win for him. And he's such a good guy. So, but yeah, if I were Penn State, yeah, I'd be very frustrated by that.
All right, we'll go to Nubias Wilborn next. And last question for Kirk will come from Mark Brennan. Go ahead, Nubias.
Hey, Kirk, thanks for doing this as always. From there, you mentioned Jason Awe earlier. What have you seen with him, particularly a guy who only had a couple years of high school football before he got to Penn State?
Well, we've all, last year, the coaches talked enough about him to enough people that it got us excited to see what he could do. And obviously he had some great players ahead of him, and he played and he showed flashes of what he could be. And I think we forget he was a young player. And so now he's had, even in the midst of the COVID and the quarantine and everything going on, just talking with Coach Pry, he was as dedicated as anybody on the defensive side of the ball at taking his game to a different level. And he personally, Coach Pry, was really excited for the results of that first game and how well he played, and cannot wait to see how he plays Saturday and can't wait to see how he plays the rest of the year. I think coaches always have a special place for guys that are not just talented, but put in the work. And so he's got everything you're looking. I mean, I was just talking to Shaka, and Shaka's like, he's legit 4'3". I go, come on, Shaka. He goes, no, defensive end, 4'3". I was like, 4'3"? He goes, I'm telling you, when he goes to the combine, he's going to run a 4'3". I was like, I don't doubt it. Penn State sends guys to the combine. I don't know what they're doing, but they run 4'3s and 4'4s. So, but I'm excited to watch both Owe and Tony, like I said earlier, against Fields and Fields' creativity, because he's going to have a remarkable game. in order, I think, to slow down what Justin Fields can do with his creativity.
All right, and last question for Kirk.
You win background of the day, though, by the way.
Thanks, man.
All right, take care.
Yeah.
All right, last question for Kirk will come from Mark Brennan. Go ahead, Mark.
Kirk, thanks again. Like everybody else is saying, we appreciate you doing this.
Sure.
Hey, I know it's a small sample size, but what did you think of what you saw from the Penn State offense under Kirk Herbstreit, and where do you kind of see it?
I can't wait to see. I think we're going to have a better feel after this game. I saw enough to like. They moved the ball. I mean, if you go back and look at the game, and I've watched the game a couple times this week, they moved the ball. It was just the miscues, like we talked earlier. We're seeing that, by the way, as an epidemic around the country. Without having spring ball, being limited and restricted somewhat throughout camp. Some have been ahead of the curve. Some have done a better job. Like I keep talking about Minnesota and Michigan. The thing I walked away from that game with Michigan and Minnesota was how well Michigan was prepared and in the midst of what everybody's dealing with. They didn't have a lot of miscues. So let's see how Penn State does in this game against a very athletic defense. Let's see how the run-pass option is blended in with what Penn State has normally done so well over the last few years with different offensive coordinators. But I personally am going to reserve judgment on kind of their identity and where they are and who they are until we see them play a little bit more. And I think this game against Ohio State will really tell us a lot more. But they got to obviously take away the miscues, and they can't start 1st and 15. They can't turn the ball over against good teams and win games. That's true for any scheme.